So after my last video, I got a lot of comments asking me to revisit the 2015 NHL draft, and I just wanted to say, I'm not going to do that. Sorry guys. But I did take a look at it, and there is one thing to come out of that draft, or more specifically one team's performance, that I think is definitely worth talking about. 2015 was a weird year for the Bruins. After making the finals in 2013 and winning the President's Trophy in 2014, Boston took a bit of a step back. Even with their defense playing up to its potential and Tuukka Rask being Tuukka Rask, they found themselves struggling to maintain their form from the previous year, mainly due to a stagnant offense. Most of these offensive struggles boiled down to the loss of Jarome Iginla to free agency and David Krejci suffering from a partially torn MCL, both of whom were top 3 in scoring for them just the year prior. This would then lead Boston to some pretty streaky performances throughout the year. They'd start below 500 in October, then win 5 straight to start November. They'd follow up an 8-1-1 run to end January with a 2-6-2 run in February. Despite all of that, they were still comfortably on track to make the playoffs, right up until McDonald's man over here showed up. Because of Ottawa's miracle run and dropping their final 3 games of the season, Boston would end up missing the playoffs, scoring 96 points, 2 points behind the Penguins for the final wildcard spot in the East. That total, by the way, still stands as the record for most points by a team to miss the playoffs. For then GM Peter Chiarelli, this was enough for the team to give him the boot, and for incoming GM Don Sweeney, the problem with the team in front of him was obvious. The core was still good, but the pieces that had helped them win in the past were aging if they hadn't aged out already, so taking a step back could prove to be a bit of a blessing in disguise. If they could sell off some of their current pieces and use them to recruit futures to bolster their core not just now but in the years to come, they could really set themselves up to succeed for the rest of their window. But after some savvy moves on draft day, they didn't just set themselves up to improve in the near future. Boston put themselves in a position that could possibly change the trajectory of the franchise forever. They held their own first rounder, and that would land at 14th overall. They would acquire the 13th overall pick by trading Milan Lucic to LA in exchange for holy shit, and they'd acquire the 15th overall pick and 2 seconds from Calgary in exchange for Dougie Hamilton. With these 2 moves, Boston now had 3 straight first rounders back to back to back. And this was the McEichel draft, one of the deepest drafts in recent memory. After the 2 obvious names at the top of the draft, just look at the guys that went after. I mean Mitch Marner, Noah Hanifin, Zach Werenski, Timo Meyer, Mikko Rantanen. The pool of available talent seemed almost unending. And when the time came, Boston went and got their guys. At 13th overall, they took Jakub Zboril. At 14th, Jake DeBrusk. And at 15th, Zachary Senyshyn. Now, it's really easy to exaggerate when talking about things in retrospect, so I need everyone to understand that I mean no hyperbole when I say that this was a generational draft fumble. Now, to be fair, let's at least go over the guys they got and evaluate how well they turned out. DeBrusk is easily the best player of the 3, a decent middle 6 winger who can play up and down the lineup, can throw up 20 goals, and who scores consistently on the power play. Unfortunately, after more than one trade request, he walked earlier this summer and signed with Vancouver in free agency. As for Zboril and Senyshyn, neither player managed to live up to their potential. Not even close. In Zboril's case, he at the very least had a depth role in Boston before an ACL injury hindered his development severely. He was then sent off to Columbus, where he spent all of last year in the AHL. Senyshyn was just a bust. Only 14 total games with Boston, he was eventually claimed off waivers by Ottawa and then took off to Europe after bouncing around in the minors for a while. As for who was taken after, well, Anthony Beauvillier, Jack Roslovic, Ilya Samsonov, all passed on. Want more depth on the wings? Would have been nice if you took Brock Besser or Travis Konechny. Struggling to replace the center depth and defensive responsibility left after Krejci and Bergeron retired? Might have been easy to replace them if you picked up a guy like Joel Eriksson Ek or Sebastian Aho. We give you a pass on Kaprizov because let's face it, everyone passed on Kaprizov. And as if it couldn't get any worse for the Bruins, at 16th overall, the Islanders took Matt Barzal. At 17th, the Jets took Kyle Connor. And at 18th, the Sens took Thomas Chabot, a dynamic playmaking first-line center capable of driving offenses all on his own, a perennial 30-goal scorer, lethal at 5-on-5, and a #1 defenseman who can quarterback a power play and eats minutes like it's candy. It's bad enough that the Bruins' 3 first-rounders all eventually led to basically nothing, but the fact that the 3 guys taken immediately afterwards all turned into all-star caliber players is honestly just embarrassing. But you know what the craziest part of all of this is? Most hockey fans already know about the failure that was the first round for the Bruins. But what if I told you that was only half the story? Because would you believe, it got worse. Remember that Dougie Hamilton trade from earlier? Well, the 2 seconds they got from Calgary were also in this draft. So along with their own second, that meant they had another 3 picks in the second round. That's 6 picks total in the first 2 rounds. They would use these second rounders to select Brandon Carlo, Jakob Forsbacka-Karlsson, and Jeremy Lauzon. Now again, we look at the positives, and Brandon Carlo, good pick. He's turned into a very serviceable player and fills a much needed defensive role in Boston's second pair, helping to back up Charlie McAvoy. But again, that's kinda it. Sure, Jeremy Lauzon is a good player now that he's got a defined role in Nashville, but with Boston he only managed 76 games across parts of 3 seasons before being lost to Seattle in the expansion draft. Forsbacka-Karlsson, copy-paste what I said about Senyshyn and they would still be an accurate description. And again, look at some of the names they missed out on. Eric Chernak, Daniel Sprong, Rupe Hintz, Rasmus Andersson, Kevin Stenlund, Jonas Siegenthaler, Anthony Sorelli, Vince Dunn. Oh, and just to turn the knife just that little bit more, after their 6 picks in the first 2 rounds, Boston would only pick 4 more times throughout the rest of the draft. They would use these picks to select Dan Vladar, Jesse Gabrielle, Cameron Hughes, and Jack Becker. Now, Gabrielle, of all the picks we've talked about today, is easily the least consequential, so we are going to ignore him. The pick immediately after Vladar was used to select Aiden Hill. The pick immediately after Hughes was Andrew Mangiapane, and the pick immediately before Becker was Matt Roy. You genuinely couldn't make this shit up if you tried. Oh cool, Joey Decord was taken 4 picks later. I wonder who took it. Oh god damn it. And this, dear viewer, is why I feel so comfortable calling this a generational fumble. Cause look, a draft pick not hitting is normal, it happens. Having an impact player taken after your picks, again, it happens, and is something I'm unfortunately all too familiar with myself. But when it happens almost a dozen times over, all in one draft, no matter how hard you try to tell me about how good DeBrusk and Carlo are, it still can't be seen as anything more than an abject failure. Sure, it didn't hurt them in the short term as they did make the finals in 2019 and win the President's Trophy in 2020 and 2023, but they still didn't win in any of those years, and now they're basically in the same position they were entering that draft, with a core that's aging and not much help on the way. And yeah, you can play the what-if game all you want, at the end of the day, they put themselves in a position to succeed and still managed to throw it all away. Might as well call it the Florida series at this point. So to recap, Boston had 10 picks in this draft, 6 of which were in the first 2 rounds, and of those 6 picks, only 2 would develop into somewhat impact players, 1 would only develop after leaving Boston, 1 is nothing more than AHL fodder at this point, and the other 2 are out of the league entirely, all while everyone else around them got star player after star player. So call it bad luck. Call it just another failure. At the end of the day, this was, and will always be, the greatest draft fumble. I mean, I guess we really didn't do that much better, so who am I really to talk about this?